Today I want to take a look at hybrid picking, and specifically hybrid picking as it relates to more modern styles of guitar playing, the kinds of things I do on this channel: prog rock, prog metal, fusion. Hybrid picking often gets associated with country, which is for good reason, because that's where I first learned how to do hybrid picking, was by playing country and bluegrass riffs. But there are a lot of awesome things you can do with hybrid picking in other styles of music. So I'm going to give you a bunch of examples of ways you can practice this, and also some examples of how I might use this technique in my actual compositions. Hybrid picking is the hybrid of playing with a pick or a plectrum and playing fingerstyle with your fingers. So if I play a note with my pick and then my middle finger, I'm hybrid picking. Now you can use the ring finger as well, and some people actually use pinky too. So in school, I actually studied traditional classical guitar. That's what my bachelor's degree is in. And when you're playing traditional fingerstyle, you never actually use your pinky on your right hand. So it's not something I'm trained to do. There are some players that do it. You find it in flamenco styles of strumming, and there's certain players that will use it in hybrid picking, like Brett Garstead, who's an awesome fusion player. He'll use his pinky sometimes. All of these examples are going to be either middle or ring or both. So you're not going to see me using the pinky here. It is an option and you can try it out, but I think most of the stuff we're going to try to do here we can do with just our middle and ring finger. On the tablature, you'll see this symbol for a downstroke of the pick, this symbol for an upstroke of the pick, and then on the notation part, not on the tab, you'll see an M for middle and an A for ring. In Guitar Pro, it doesn't do the M or A on the tab itself, just on the notation part, so that's how you're going to see it listed here. So now that all that nerdy stuff is out of the way, let's get to the exercises. I'm going to break these exercises into a couple of different sections. The first are really basic hybrid picking exercises you can do just to get used to the technique. So the first one we're going to do is take a power chord, just a G power chord. I'm going to down pick on the low string and then use my middle finger on the A string. Now as I'm doing this, I'm not letting these notes ring together, which I suppose you could do. I'm trying to separate each note. Just getting used to that technique of going back and forth. Take it at a moderate tempo. Try to focus on being as even as possible. Now when I'm hybrid picking like this, for most of this lesson, I'm not trying to get so much of a pop from my finger. When you're doing this kind of thing in country or bluegrass, you might want more of the that kind of sound where I'm getting under the string and popping it more. That's definitely not what I'm doing here. I'm trying to simulate an upstroke, for example. So down, up, down, up, down. It's definitely a little bit of a different tone, but that's kind of what I'm going for here. So I'm not trying to get underneath the string and pop it. Cool sound, and sometimes that works really well. But for this, we're going to try to just do more of a normal stroke with our middle finger. I can do this up an octave too. Just kind of getting used to how this feels on different strings. I can also lead with the middle finger. Just a different rhythmic way of doing this. If I want to make this more musical, I can move some notes around. Makes it a little more fun to practice that way. I can also skip over strings, so I'm going to do an octave here. Still pick middle. And reverse that. So here's an exercise that uses both the middle and ring finger. Down, middle, down, ring. Trying to get used to bringing in that ring finger there. It's definitely trickier than using the middle finger, and I'm going to favor my middle finger for most of these ideas, but I will have to use the ring in some cases, so it's good to practice it. One last basic example here, and that's to take a scale, in this case a G minor pentatonic scale. Classic first box shape. And instead of alternate picking it, I'm going to replace all of the upstrokes with my middle finger. Down, middle, down, middle, down, middle, down, middle. This is a little bit awkward, and it's definitely not how I would play this scale if I was trying to do it quickly, but it's a good exercise for getting used to doing the down and then middle back and forth. Now let's take a look at some basic pentatonic rock licks. So I've kicked on a little bit more distortion, and I'm going to use hybrid picking to make these licks a little bit easier to play. And in some cases, I'm going to be able to play them faster with hybrid picking. So in A minor pentatonic, we have this rising sequence of fours. I can very easily pick this. But if I use my middle finger, I don't have to jump my pick up and down. This makes it a little bit easier. Now I can descend as well. Middle, pick. Now the power of this technique really comes in when I'm skipping strings. So I can go E string, G string. Once again, I can pick this. But if I use my middle finger, then my hand can stay stationary. Next, we have this pattern. So I'm using my middle finger, pick. Definitely easier to do this here than with the pick because I have to jump my pick more quickly. I can do it, and I can do a sweep maybe. But it's just more consistent to use my middle finger, especially on this next one where, once again, I skip strings. Much, much easier with hybrid picking. And I can alternate between those two. Next, we have this cliche pentatonic sequence, one that Kirk Hammett does all the time, for example. Just this pattern of threes. I can pick that pretty fast, but if I bring in my middle finger, just in one spot, I can do it way quicker. Here's another cliche rock pattern. This happens all the time in blues rock. I think this happens in the Freebird solo, for example, by Leonard Skinner. It's a favorite of Jimmy Page as well. And I can pick that pretty quickly, but I can do it much more cleanly and even faster if I bring in just one middle finger. Down, down, middle. At speeds that I couldn't even get close to reaching with a pick, and much cleaner. One last idea here is this really cliche, almost Chuck Berry style lick. Now I can do a roll here, which I'm going to talk more about later, but down, middle, ring. I can start to run that even quicker, right? So here's an example of a pentatonic lick from one of my own solos. This is from my song Deviation 2070. I put out a new playthrough video of this last week, or 2 weeks ago, I guess at this point, and that has a new mix with it as well. So if you want to go check out the whole song, you can. And there's this fast descending sequence of fours within a pentatonic scale. It looks like this. It's kind of the basic pattern. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Something like that. I could probably pick this too, actually. But I kind of favor the legato technique here, and I think using the hybrid picking makes it even easier. I mentioned rolls earlier, which is something that banjo players do a lot, for example, and country players. That's basically this idea of pick, middle, ring, but I'm kind of just rolling up the strings. So I'm using a G major arpeggio here. In this case, I'm separating the notes. You could ring them together too. Those kind of sounds. This is a really useful technique. Let's do that with a different arpeggio. This is an A minor 9. So I'm going to roll up this shape. And then move it up each set of strings. I could also reverse this roll, so pick, ring, middle. I'm not nearly as good at this one. I should probably practice it more myself. That's another way to do a roll. Now you can get some pretty outlandish sounds with this. I'm just going to play the note E in 3 different octaves, but I'm going to roll with it. I believe I heard Guthrie Govan use this at some point. Absolutely wild, and there's no way for me to play that faster than hybrid picking unless I did some sort of tapping. But if we actually want to strike each note, that's really the only way to do it cleanly and quickly. So let's take this roll idea to something that sounds maybe a little bit more modern or more prog. So I'm going to take these prog rock power chords, and I'm going to roll up them. Really crazy sound, but cool though. One of my favorite ways to use hybrid picking is with octaves. I did this earlier in the basic examples, but it's very easy to do octaves with hybrid picking. There's no faster way to play octaves than to use hybrid picking. It's very hard, to pick this cleanly really quickly. There's probably some better alternate pickers out there that can do it faster than me, but that idea of going back and forth really quickly between octaves, so much easier with hybrid picking. And I can do some cool extended things with that. I'll take this G major arpeggio, and I'll add an octave up to each of those. I can use this octave idea in much more interesting sounding licks. Here's a pentatonic scale. I'm going to slide down on the G string. Really cool sounding, and I kind of take that anywhere. Really cool. I could also use it for some interesting ascending patterns. And there I'm actually bringing in my ring finger as well for a little roll on those last 2 shapes. Very interesting, and the kind of thing that would be really hard to do with just a pick. I did a lick at the beginning which was sort of a pedal point lick, meaning I'm continually going back to the same note. And this is a technique that's really common, especially in classical music, early classical music, and then kind of adopted by the neoclassical guitarists like Yngwie Malmsteen. So you hear a lot of these. Right, that sound is very familiar if you've played any of that kind of music. But for me, it's really easy to hybrid pick these things, especially when you get to sort of multiple string crossings. So I'm going to take an A minor scale, I'm going to go straight down it. I can do that with a pick at a moderate tempo, it's not too bad. But once you get to those big string jumps, it's going to be much easier with hybrid picking. So I'm going to do it like this. Now let's do some arpeggios. Here's a basic G major shape. Pretty easy for me to pick this one, actually. But if I wanted to, I could hybrid pick. And reverse it. I could sequence this up with different shapes of the arpeggio. The next one is an E minor arpeggio, just ascending 1 octave. Down, hammer, down, middle. This is one of those shapes you would think there'd be other ways to play it, and maybe you could do some tapping or some sort of, different shape. But really the cleanest and easiest way to play this is with hybrid picking. Makes the jumping and the switch back to the low string much easier. So this brings up another technique related to hybrid picking, and that's Swybrid picking, which is the combination of sweeping and hybrid picking. So let's take this A minor arpeggio here. I'm going to go down, down like a sweep, middle, down, down, middle. Similar sound to the roll, but I'm using sweeping instead. Really cool. Now I can extend this to maybe a 4-note pattern. And I could use a roll in combination with the sweeping. So down, down, middle, ring. Or I could do 3 sweeps, 3 notes of a sweep, up. Well, up with my middle finger. Very cool sound. Get some weird stuff. So that was an example of how I might actually use this in some music of mine. This is from a little funk thing I put out a couple of months ago. And it's this basic arpeggio pattern, but I'm doing this odd rhythm, and I'm using hybrid picking to help me get some string skipping. It's a pattern of 6, hybrid pick at the end, and then a pattern of 5. Down, middle, hammer. So even that in and of itself is cool. And get this pattern of 5, which would be really weird to do, especially if I was trying to alternate pick, because it would flip things around. But it's much easier to do with hybrid picking. So that whole sequence. So that's the pattern, 11. And I'll take it up through different arpeggios. And then 5s. Now that's something that would be really hard to play with traditional picking. In fact, it's quite hard to do it as is, but the hybrid picking is making the right-hand part at least a little bit easier. Here's some more things you can do with Swybrid picking. So I'm going up with a sweep, and I'm using my middle finger to turn this pattern around. And then I'm going to up sweep those last 2 notes. So I use my middle finger to turn my pick around. Down, up. As opposed to trying to do down and then switch it over there, or skip over the string and do that. If I have a single note on a string and I want to turn the direction of my pick, using a middle finger is a really good way to do that. I can take this further too and go up to the high E string. Really cool sound, and once again, something that would be a little bit more difficult just sweeping. That was an example of using this kind of Swybrid approach in some actual music. This is in 15/16, so we have a pattern of 7 and then a pattern of 8. Down, middle, down, down, up, up, up. It's the 7. Down, middle, down, down, middle, up, up, up. That's the 8. So all together. Then to a different chord. Once again, this hybrid picking is making a really weird pattern like that a little bit more playable. You can mix hybrid picking and selective picking. Now, selective picking is basically just hammering on it from nowhere. So you pick a certain number of notes and hammer on a certain number of notes. But I could hybrid pick some of these patterns as well. So I'm just going to take this same major arpeggio I've used a bunch. Maybe palm mute. But instead of using my pick, I'm using my middle finger. Or this pattern. It's like an E minor arpeggio. but I could hybrid pick as well. So I'm going to use the pick. I'm going to get a pattern of 5. Pick, middle finger, hammer, hammer, hammer. 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1. Really cool. I can move the top notes around, so I'm going to go to the higher strings. Very interesting. I could even combine like Swybrid picking with that. It's pretty hard to do, but so down, down, middle, hammer, hammer, hammer. There's really a lot of places you could take that. That's just a couple of simple examples, and they sound really cool and really unusual, but I'm using hybrid picking to kind of help me get from string to string. So to finish this off, here are a couple more examples of hybrid picking in my own music. This first one is a riff from my song Paramnesia. It's on a 7-string, which I don't have my 7-string out right now. But I use hybrid picking just on a couple of these licks to hit some of these higher notes. So here it is. So you can use hybrid picking with heavier riffs. It works really well in that context depending on what you're playing. The other thing I'll do a lot is what I call fake thumping. Now I have a whole lesson devoted to that I did a couple of years ago. I will link that down below. Basically what I'm doing is hybrid picking really hard to make it sound like I'm thumping, because I'm not very good at thumping. So here are a few examples of that. Here are a couple of my own lead licks that use hybrid picking. The first one is from my song Paramnesia. This is in 11/8. And I think the next one's also in 11/8. So there's lots of 11/8 in this lesson. So the pattern looks like this. Really weird, but the hybrid picking helps with some of the string crossing. Lastly, here's a lick from the solo in my song Cosmic Void. This combines a bunch of different techniques, and we're doing a pattern of 6 and then 5 as 16th notes. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sliding, sweeping, legato, hybrid pick. So I'm mixing all these different techniques together, but it makes for a really cool sounding lick. Then I move it up higher. So all together. So there is a really detailed look at the technique of hybrid picking. I think this is something all guitarists should try out because there's a lot of possibilities with this technique. I find myself using this more and more as I get older to really handle some of these awkward patterns rhythmically and also awkward patterns across the fretboard. Just a really nice way to get from string to string. You can get some really cool sounds out of it. Now, all of these exercises I've compiled into a PDF and a guitar profile. I'm going to sell that for $2. The link is down below if you want to pick that up. I think if you follow these exercises in order like I've put them here, you'll get a really good handle on this technique and how to use it specifically in this kind of music. But if you enjoyed this lesson, subscribe, hit the bell notification, all of that good stuff, and I will see you in the next video. Till then, stay proggy.